Today I'm here with Bob Burg, Hall of Fame keynote speaker and best-selling co-author of the Go Giver and Go Giver book series and host of Go Giver podcast. Hi Bob, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. Can we kick off with a little background on who you are and how'd you end up doing what you do today?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Massachusetts, though I moved to down here to Florida as fast as I could. I enjoy the warm weather. But in between that time, I started out in broadcasting, first on radio doing sports, and then doing television news at a very, very small ABC affiliate out in the Midwestern United States. I was the late night news guy, but I really wasn't that good. And it wasn't long before I like to say I graduated into sales and began to do that. Floundered at first because I didn't have any sales experience, and the company I was with didn't really provide any. But fortunately, I found a couple great books at the bookstore one day, one by Tom Hopkins, one by Zig Ziglar, two of the real sales icons, and started just to I read it, I studied it, I practiced it, I went out there and did it, and within a few weeks my sales began to really go well, which was a big thing for me, because what I realized at that point was that if you have a methodology for doing something, then you don't have to worry about being the inventor of the wheel, right? Someone has probably already done what you want to do, and you can emulate them. So I call it following a system, right? What is a
Yeah.
system? It's the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles, the key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, then you know that you just need to do A and continue to do A and continue to do A. Eventually, you'll get the desired result of B. But the neat thing, though, is that I found sales wasn't just about the sales skills, as important as those are. It was really about personal development. And what I suggest to all young people is understand that success begins on the inside, and it manifests itself outwardly, but it begins by what you feed it. So when you read the good books, books that are books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, books like Think and Grow Rich, books like uh, As a Man Thinketh, and there's just so many wonderful books out there that really build our mind and help us to then be positioned to be successful. And that's really what I did. And from there I began, I worked my way up eventually to sales manager of another company, and from there began teaching people how to sell and communicate better, and yada yada yada. Here we are.
Well, this is great and really fitting because here at BossMove, we want to talk about some of these specific skills and principles that really drive success and the leadership ability. So personal development is a big part of that. What sticks out to you? What are some of the big drivers that you lead with in terms of your approach?
Well, I mean, I think really, in a sense, much of success is having an understanding of human nature. How and why people do the things they do. What are they motivated by? What are they driven by? I think Dale Carnegie really hit it right on the head back in I think it was 37, when How to Win Friends and Influence People was published, and it's where he said, and I think this was really the the underlying premise of his entire book. It's where he said, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons.
Right.
And I think that's so important to understand. It means that we need to be focused on bringing value to other people. I like to say be inwardly motivated, but outwardly focused.
But I like that point a lot. And I think that sort of leads into some other parts of this conversation. But I remember talking to my daughter a few weeks ago, and the theme of the conversation was around listening. But the point was, it's important to listen because if you can really understand the other person's goals and objectives
Exactly.
and align yourself to help them with their goals and objectives, you're going to get a lot further than really pushing your own agenda, which naturally happens because you get into that those
Hmm.
interactions with people, and you always have something in the back of your mind that you're trying to get out of the meeting or trying to do, when really you need to put that to the side, just listen, figure out what the other person is trying to do, help them, and then they're going to inherently want to help you, or there's other positive benefits that you would get out of it.
Great,
But
great advice from dad to daughter.
but I'd love to hear you have a different view. You broke it down and wrote a whole book around it that covers some principles that even dive deeper
Sure,
into it. But love
sure.
to learn from your perspective and maybe even expand that further for her.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to go through the five laws from the Go Giver, if you would like, and that's
Yeah, why don't we kick off with that? I like it and love to hear it from your words.
well, the premise of the Go Giver, because I always like to begin with premises, so we're all facing the same direction, right? And the basic premise of the Go Giver is simply that shifting your focus, and this is really where I think it all begins, shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. And again, it really ties into human nature. So we're not talking about some woo-woo way out reasons. Oh, just give, be nice, and this will happen. No, not at all. Not at all. It's that when you're that person who can take your focus off yourself and place it on helping other people, helping solve their challenges, helping discover and understand what they want, what they need, what they desire, well, people feel good about you. People want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They want to tell others about you. That's really the premise. And around that premise, there are five laws that John David Mann, he's my co-author, and he's really the lead writer. The Go-Giver is a parable, so it's a short fictional story. And John was, I'm a how-to guy, as you can already probably tell. I'm step one, step two, step three. John's a magnificent writer, so it was really a great collaboration. And what we call the five laws of stratospheric success, or the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity.
So you should probably have those memorized pretty well by now in terms of giving a little brief summary on each one.
So yeah, so let's do that. Then if you'd like, we can take any of the other laws and go deeper into it. But a very, very thumbnail summary would be the law of value says your true worth in the business sense, your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. Uh, that is counterintuitive when you first hear that, but we'll go back to that if you'd like, and we can kind of explain what that really means.
Sure.
The second law, the law of compensation, says your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. Law number three, also counterintuitive, the law of influence says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Law number four, the law of authenticity, says the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. And law number five, the law of receptivity, says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving.
That's interesting. So the first one, value, we're talking about the value you're creating for others when you're looking at that mindset of let me focus on the other person's problems and challenges. Um, your ability to actually contribute and do things for others essentially drives value.
Sure. Well, you know what you it's important, I think, to understand, especially because we say your is give more in value than you take in payment. Well, that sounds a little bit like wow, sounds all nicey nice, but it kind of sounds like a recipe for bankruptcy. Give more in
Right.
value than I take in payment. So the first thing I think that's important is to understand the difference between price and value. So price is a dollar figure, a dollar amount. It's finite. It is what it is. Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that brings so much worth or value to another human being that they will willingly, in this case, let's say, exchange their money for this value and be glad they did while you make a very healthy profit. Very quick example. You hire an accountant to do your taxes, and she charges you, we're just going to name a round figure, $1,000. That's her fee, literally her price, $1,000. But what value does she provide you in exchange? Well, first, she saves you $5,000 in taxes. She saves you countless hours of time, and she provides you and your family with the security and the peace of mind of knowing it was done correctly, right? So she gave you well over $5,000 in value in exchange for $1,000 fee or price. She gave you more in value than she took in payment. So you feel great about it. And she made a very healthy profit because in her mind, it was worth it to her to exchange her time, her knowledge, her wisdom, her energy, and so forth for that $1,000. So, in any free market based exchange, and when I say free market, I simply mean no one is forced to do business with anyone else. In any free market based exchange, there should always be at least two profits: the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them come away better off afterwards than they were beforehand. But here's the interesting thing: it begins with the seller focusing not on the money, focusing not on the fee, but focusing on the immense value she's providing. This is why John and I say that money is simply an echo of value, right? Money is an
Yeah,
echo of value. It's the thunder, if you will, to values lightning, which means nothing more than that the value you're providing the other person must be the focus. The value comes first. The money you receive is simply a natural result of the value you've provided.
I had a friend that told me once, money's like air. You can't think about it. It's something that you have to live and get by. If you just think about the money, you're not really creating that value. And
Well, and this is why, and that's a great point. Because remember, and this goes back to, to the basic premise of the Go Giver, I guess, goes back to Dale Carnegie's statement. No one is going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet, right? They're
right.
not going to buy from you because you need the money, as your friend said. And they're not even going to buy from you because you're a really nice person. They're going to buy from you because they believe they'll be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And again, in a free market based environment, that's the only reason why anyone should buy from you or from me or from anyone else. But that's great because it means that that entrepreneur or salesperson who really gets just exactly what you told your daughter to focus on them and their issues, that's the one that creates that what we call benevolent context for success.
Right. And it gets me thinking about ROI. Like, is that there's some real solid return for them and the even
Sure.
time they're spending. The law of compensation, the second one you mentioned,
Yeah.
and it sounds like this is when you take your product or service, you're able to deliver it, and it's almost essentially the scale that determines the
Yeah. Absolutely. That's perfect. It's, it says that your income, is first determined by how many people, I mean, by how many people you serve. That's a scale, as well as how well you serve them, that original value. So where law number one says to give more in value than you take in payment, law number two tells us that the more people whose lives you touch or impact with that exceptional value, the more money with which you'll be rewarded. So we go back to your accountant in the first example. She did a great job of giving you more in value than she took in payment. So you feel great about her. You do business with her again, and you'd probably tell others about her as well and provide her lots of great referrals. Well, her other clients feel the same way. So our accountant is very quickly amassing an army of personal walking ambassadors. And as she continues to provide that kind of exceptional value to the lives of more and more people, her income will continue to grow and grow. You may remember Nicole Martin. She was the CEO in the story. And she explained to Joe, the protege, that law number one, the law of value, represents your potential income. But it's law number two, the number of lives you're able to actually impact with that value. That's what equals your actual income. So we could say exceptional value plus significant reach, or as you said, scale, that equals very high compensation.
Fair. I like it. The law of influence. This is one I'm particularly interested in chatting about because I feel like this is at the end of the day probably the skill that you need to make that influence on people.
Yeah.
When we talked about making influence on decisions and things of that
Hmm.
sort.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, this is
you,
this one's my favorite.
yeah, okay, I'd love to hear your pointers and thoughts around the law of influence.
Yeah. So your law number three, law of influence, says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Again, sounds counterintuitive, maybe even Pollyanna-ish, right? But then you think about it. The greatest leaders you know, and I know your reputation, you're one of these, the greatest influencers, the consistently top producing salespeople. This is simply how they run their lives and conduct their businesses. They're always looking out for the other person in a positive way. They're always looking for how they can add value, how they can assist others. Now, let me clarify this and qualify it though, because I think the definition of the law of influence can be can be easily confused, and I think this is very important. When we say place the other person's interests first, we do not mean you should be anyone's doormat or a martyr or self sacrificial in any way. Absolutely not at all. It's simply understanding, as Joe, the protege in the story, learned from several of the mentors, the golden rule of business, of sales, is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those feelings toward you in others than by genuinely moving from an I focus or me focus to an other focus. Looking to, as Sam, one of the mentors in the story, told Joe, looking to make your win all about the other person's win.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how to actually make that happen. Sounds great in theory, Bob, but it's almost the default nature is, hey, I got this thing in mind. This is what I want. And we naturally focus on these things in our head that we desire. And it's a different mindset sometimes for people to get out of that. And I'm curious, how would you break that down for somebody to get to thinking that way, then eventually build it into a pattern that's more natural for them?
Yeah. I think the key first to someone even being open to that idea is for them to be at a place where, while they may have had some success, some real legitimate success, or not, or a certain degree, what have you, that they're maybe thinking there's a better, more effective way to do things. Because, as you know, until we know there's an issue, there's nothing we're going to do to try to overcome that. So once someone is kind of ready to hear about this, then then we can kind of, we have a place to work from. So we'll say to somebody, I, you might be thinking, well, but I care about me, not about this other person. Well, and that's okay. That's human. As human beings, we are self-interested human beings. Okay. So we're not saying you should deny your self-interest. That's denying human nature. Okay. What we're saying is suspend your self-interest. Just kind of put it to the side for a little bit. Well, why? Why would I do that? Because remember, it goes back to understanding that no one's going to do business with you because you want them to. They're going to do business with them because they feel as though you have their best interests at heart and that they have a reason to do it. So, if you went into a sales presentation totally focused on the money, well, you're going to ask questions, but you're not really going to be listening, to understand. You're going to be listening to kind of be able to sharp angle that person into a close. You're not going to take the time to really discover what they need. Instead, you're going to start really promoting your own stuff. When they have an objection, you'll answer it, but you're going to be a little defensive, right? Because, well, that's, that objection is getting in the way of getting their money. And by the end of the conversation, this person probably, they may like you, they may think you're a nice person, but they probably know that you're more about yourself and about getting their money than you really are serving them. And if we were to say, are they more likely or less likely to buy from you at this point? The answer would probably be less likely. On the other hand, let's say you're the same person. You still, need the money. You still feel self-interested. It's okay. But you're going to suspend that self-interest. You're going to put it to the side. And now you're going to go in there with one motive, and that is to provide value, exceptional value to this other human being. So now you go in there and you ask questions, but now you're listening, and you're listening to really understand what this person's saying and what this person's feeling and what this person means, and you're going to kind of take their answers, and you're going to go deeper with those answers by asking additional questions. You understand that you have one job right here, and that is to discover what they want, what they need, what they desire. Okay, and even with that, to maybe add insights that they don't even know when there's an issue based on something they said, which because you were really listening. And then you make sure that you confirm that everything you feel that they need, want, and desire, you confirm that you got that right before you move on. Because you know that people come at things from their own worldview, and we don't always interpret things the same way. Uh, Only when you know for sure that you understand their needs, wants, and desires do you begin to match the benefits of your product or service with their end goal. Now, when they have questions or objections, you genuinely welcome those, because you know that if they have an objection, there's something on their mind, and it's about them, not about us, right? And so you work with this person. You understand that probably the objection they're giving you isn't necessarily the true objection, but they don't know the process of as well as you do, so they're kind of maybe just uncomfortable about something, and so they kind of throw out a knee-jerk kind of objection, and your job is to work with them patiently and empathetically in order that both of you are able to get to the root of the objection, and then you work through it with them as partners in order to advance the sale. And then by the time you are ready to ask them for the order, you're simply asking them to take action on something that they've already told you they want to do. And I then ask the question, do you feel this person is less likely or more likely to want to buy from you right now? And it's probably more likely, because they know you have their best interest in mind.
The key word that stuck out to me was empathetical.
Mhm.
And I'm curious if you could maybe speak to that a little bit, because it seems that that's the underpinning theme of
Yeah.
your view on influence is the empathy part. But
It really is. Yeah, I think you hit that right on the head. The according to the dictionary, empathy is the identification with or vicarious experiencing of another person's feelings, which sounds like just a fancy way of saying stepping into the other person's shoes, and it would be, except for the fact that most of us have different sized feet. So, in other words, literally, we can't step into their shoes. Figuratively, we can't step into their minds or into their hearts because we're not them. And we haven't necessarily had the same experiences they have. Okay. We all come from our own set of beliefs and way of looking at the world. The good news, though, is empathy doesn't mean you necessarily understand how they feel. It means you are able to communicate through maybe what you say, how you say it, combination of such, but really just how you show up, communicating that you understand they're feeling something, and that this something is distressful to them, and that you are there for them and to help them work through it. And when you do that, when you're able to communicate empathy in that way, that just it meets the human need people have to feel understood and to feel valued and to feel as though someone truly wants to be there for them and help them.
yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like you're walking them through the steps to open up more to
Yeah.
share what they're feeling so that you actually understand it.
Great way to put it. Yeah. Because without that empathy, they may not feel comfortable doing that. And sometimes, you have to give an I message to put the onus of and that shouldn't be confused with a I focus. An I message simply means, you're taking on the onus of any kind of misunderstanding. So it might, it might just be me. I get the feeling there's something you may not feel totally comfortable with, and perhaps don't want to ask me about, but I just want to let you know I do this all the time as part of my job. And I just want you to feel very, very comfortable in sharing with me any concern you might have. And when you do that, boom, you've really given that person, as you said, permission to open up and share.
So if we were to break this down into some steps and how to be more empathetic, obviously there's that listening component,
Hmm.
and then there's some steps you want to carry forward, and it's almost like you in some there's two parts. I think you have to notice, because if
Oh,
you're noticing something, you want to pick up on it. And sometimes you can read people and sense their emotions off of it.
yeah, it's
You're
the
really stressed
attention
out,
aspect. Yeah, it's really paying attention to that person and seeing that person as a person, not just as a buyer. Seeing them as a human being who has feelings and who does care. And I think when excuse me, when we do give that person our attention, that's when we're able to listen, and listen in such a way that we pick up on not just what they say, but those things they don't say.
right? So look for things, noticing what they're saying, the nonverbal cues as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
And I think speaking on those, because you got to be able to address them and communicate it and saying, "Hey, I notice you're upset," and
Hmm.
you may not know why, but then from here, do we start getting? I feel like there's a little bit of you kind of need to play the line of being assumptive sometimes.
It depends, and I think that's where the know, like, and trust comes in. And I think throughout and this also has to do with, before the sales process, when you're getting to know that person, and it may be someone you've gotten to know over the course of 6 months or a month or a week, or you may have just met them right there, but you've gotten to know enough about them and them enough about you that there's a feeling of comfort, which is very, very important. It really is so much about the relationship. And when that person does feel as though they know you, like you, and trust you, they're much more likely to open up than if
That's
that
true.
feeling isn't there.
So there's some even steps within that to help you be more empathetic with people. Is some of those things where you can make people feel good about themselves, and some of those things are those compliments that are meaningful.
I think it comes down, yeah, you're right. And I think it really comes down to a genuine interest in that person.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
That's like the
That's something
timeless.
my dad just always had. He was a guy who, just his people skills were exquisite. And it really was, with him, it was very natural. He just had a very deep interest in others. He always desired to help other people feel genuinely good about themselves. And as a result, he was always so interested in other people. Didn't matter what their profession, what they did, it didn't matter. And people could tell, and people knew it
Yeah,
was genuine. And by the time he went somewhere twice, he was just loved. And that really, and now that, with him, that was very natural. With others, it isn't. But it's okay. You can develop that. You can develop that genuine interest in others.
I agree. I remember listening to one podcast where the person mentioned that you can learn something from everyone. So think of every person on this planet as a potential
Yeah,
person you can learn
absolutely.
something from. So that sort of shifts it a little bit.
Yeah, well, yeah, the sages said, "Who is wise?" And said, "That person who learns from all others." And I think that now, Jim Rohn, the famous speaker and author and business philosopher, once said, "You can learn from everyone. From some people, you learn what to do, and from others, you learn what not to do." And I think we've all seen plenty of those. So, yeah. But the good news is, as you said, you certainly can learn, from everyone.
Absolutely. Is there anything else before we jump into the couple other laws around empathy or ideas around practicing it?
No, I mean, I think you practice it by making a decision to be empathetic.
Yeah, I agree. Is make
Yeah,
the person feel felt and really find out
yeah,
where they're at in their their eyes or their head.
yeah, exactly.
Try to get in their shoes.
That's right.
Well, let's talk about the law of authenticity.
Yeah, the law of authenticity says the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. In this part of the story, Deborah, one of the mentors, shared a lesson she learned in her sales career, and that is that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they are all very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true, authentic core. But when you do, when you show up as yourself day after day, week after week, month after month, well, people feel good about you. People feel comfortable with you. They feel safe with you. Why wouldn't they? They know who they're getting. Your consistency basically says, I can be trusted. You know who I am, right? Um, I think people sometimes confuse authenticity, though, as, this is just who I am, take me or leave me. And which, I always say is a great philosophy if you don't want to have any friends and if you don't want to do very well in business. Not a good philosophy if that's not your goal. Really, authenticity is simply, it's really just acting congruently with your values. That's really what authenticity is. Authenticity is not an excuse for just not having a filter and saying whatever you want because there's some authentic. No, it's also not an excuse for not growing, right? It's the person who says, well, I have anger issues and I yell a lot and yell at people a lot. And if I were to do anything differently, that wouldn't be authentic of me. And of course, that's malarkey. It simply means this person has an authentic problem, right?
Right.
That person needs to authentically work on and improve upon in order to become a better, higher, more effective, authentic version of themselves.
Yeah, it's so interesting that this is something that's important today because I feel like we're always influenced to be who we're not. So it's
Exactly.
really key. And then the last one I wanted to
Yeah.
get into
Yeah.
was
This one
your
kind of ties it in together, ties it all together. The law of receptivity.
yeah.
Yeah. This one says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. And when we say this, we really just mean that, yeah, you breathe out, but you also have to breathe in in order to sustain life, in order to thrive in life, right? It's not one or the other. You breathe out carbon dioxide, you breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving, you breathe in, which is receiving. Um, Giving and receiving, contrary to the messages we get from the world around us. And, the world around us constantly gives us not mixed messages, but terrible messages about prosperity, about money, about abundance, about business. Oh my goodness! You'd think anybody who has made a fortune did it somehow on the backs of others or through nefarious means. Now, it's a big world. There's people who do bad things, but by and large, especially to the degree that you're in a free market environment where no one's forced to do business with you, the only way you can earn a lot of money is, again, providing great value to a lot of people, placing their interests first, coming at it authentically, and then being willing to receive. So giving and receiving are not opposite concepts, despite those messages. No, giving and receiving are simply two sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem. It's not you're a giver or a receiver. No, you're a giver and a receiver. Now, what you know is that the laws of life tell us that the giving comes first. Uh, you plant before you harvest, you reap before you sow, you give before you receive. That's how life works. Okay. Um, but you've got to be able to, once you've set that in motion, you've got to be able to allow yourself to receive. And because of the messages we get from the world around us, from the time we're, it can be from the time we're little kids, from a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television, movies, the horrible, my friend Randy Gage does a great vignette on movies, and he's a prosperity coach. He's a prosperity teacher, basically. And he's terrific. And he shows how there are so many messages of lack that are in movies. And it's not that there's some conspiracy to do that, just what sells. Okay. And so you notice people in movies are generally portrayed as one of two types. There are the good people who are usually poor and struggling, but they're always happy, right? They're poor but happy, but they're always being stepped on, stepped over, taken advantage of by who? The evil rich people who are nasty and cowardly and have no soul. Well, and you see this in movies all the time. But he brings up in the first Spider-Man movie when Peter Parker and Uncle Ben are sitting on the couch and they're talking about their financial situation, and Uncle Ben says, "Well, Peter, we may not be rich, but at least we're honest." Oh, what a horrible, horrible message for a young kid to hear. Okay, what is the presupposition, the premise of that statement? That if you're honest, well, you're not rich. If you're rich, you're not honest. Well, I said, well, that's just a movie. Well, that's every movie. It's also practically every message that people get from the world around us. That gets in the unconscious, which is the most insidious thing of all. You don't even realize it, right? And this is why people will they'll actually have an unconscious aversion to the kind of prosperity that they have earned the right to take in, right? So I always tell people, that make a study of prosperity. There are so many good people out there, like Randy, and people like Bob Proctor, and Sharon Lechter, and Ellen Rogan, and David Nagel, and Ken Honda, and so many great people that speak and write and teach and do videos and the whole thing on prosperity. And it's always 99.9% of it is the unconscious aspect. There's a great book that was published in 1960. It was one of the first books I ever read. It's when I started to get into learning about this, called Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, which basically just talks about the fact that it's our beliefs. That was really the first of the books that really came out and said your belief system dictates your future. And
Right, right.
it's a magnificent book. But yeah, so we really need to retrain our brains to be receptive to that which we have earned.
Right. So just like being able to have that mindset to give and think of that first, it
Yeah,
reciprocates back as when you're at that time
absolutely.
that you need help, you need to be pretty open and
Uh-huh, exactly.
being
Yeah,
able to get that back in return.
exactly.
Bob, this has been great. I really appreciate this conversation and thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.